Reminds me of Green Lantern.
Yeah, or even Vexen with the different animals. This
so
time
how do we feel about
powers.
her not having cat ears?
Okay.
Because that was controversial. I don't think it's all right.
I don't know if two white people should sit here and talk about the cat
fantasy
ears.
races.
But,
I don't know.
Here's the thing, okay?
There
just had a volume where they were like, Blake, you could be human or you could be a cat. And Blake said no, right? And so I just hope that, like, that's something that they talk about in the movie, I guess. That, like, I don't know. And it's weird, too, because if this is after Volume 9, then, okay, fine, whatever. But if this is still before Volume 9, because it took place in between Volume 7 and 8, I think was the thing, is that, like, the data part, right, when they were training, that was still in Alice, right? So if this movie is canon, as they are trying to say that it's canon, why in Volume 9, when Blake has that conversation, it's like you could either be human or a cat, if Blake already knows, right? Because the double persona thing implied some doubt, like self-doubt. Why would Blake still have self-doubt if she was already a human in the Justice League?
I guess... Well, my thing is that I don't think her feelings have anything to do with it. I think she's
No, I'm not saying her feelings, Hunter. I'm saying in Volume 9, when Blake has the conversation with her other self, why would her other self bring up that she could either be human or a cat if she already experienced being human and her faunus identity was reinforced in this side material
This is why I
bullshit.
like to view this as, like, canon adjacent.
Right. But
like,
they're saying it's canon, so I'm going to scrutinize them because if they just said that it's not canon and it's just a little bit of fun, but the problem is that Rooster Teeth thinks that if you don't say it's canon, no one's gonna watch it. So they're saying it's canon. So because they are saying to me it is canon, I need to scrutinize the idea because if the whole point of Blake losing her ears is that by the end she embraces that she was a faunus and whatever, like then in Volume 9, if this doesn't happen after Volume 9 but happens again during that Volume in 7 and 8 time period, the question becomes, why? Like, why did that happen in Volume 9?
It does create a kind of internal logic issue
like it
when
breaks
she's like,
the issue.
Like, oh, well, you were a human briefly,
and
don't
you didn't
remember?
like it.
Which is why I like the idea of it being kind of canon adjacent.
I understand.
Where it's like, okay, it's fine until it fucks with the formula.
I'm just being a bitch about it because I'm like, well, you said this.
That is true, but
so
you're
now
right.
What?
That is an inconsistency.
You know? I don't know. I feel like that RWBY's biggest mistake was making fantasy racism in the first place.
Or not handling it better.
But I don't know if it was ever necessary to begin with. Because you could just have, and I don't want to go on a tangent because I know that this is about the trailer for the movie, but there was the opportunity to just have kingdom-based dislike. Like, what do you say, xenophobia?
Yeah.
Like, kingdom-based dislike for each other. If you wanted this, like, humanity is divided, you didn't need human and faunus. You needed Atlas versus Vacuo, which I'm assuming we will still get in Volume 10, but, like, the narrative in terms of humanity is divided. They never needed anti-faunus racism. They already had a war over resources, right? And so it was never necessary for the plot to begin with.
In spite of everything, I do like the faunus as a world-building thing, even though I believe
but you could have just had them.
Yeah, I know.
Exist.
I mean, the point of the fantasy racism, I guess, is a contentious issue. I think
I'm not going to.
I think it works. Well, I really love Ilya's and Blake's stuff where it's about like being in the closet, kind of.
Oh yeah.
That kind of metaphor, I think works. That's when I think it worked the best because I feel like obviously the White Fang wasn't the best part of RWBY. It's the one thing I will always be like, yeah, that's a fair complaint to have about it. When
it comes to the ears, it depends on how it's handled in the movie, but I'm going to presume that it won't be handled well, and therefore I don't think they should have done it, because, like, what would you equate this to? You know what I mean? Because isn't it weird that a character is in one world and they're a minority, and then they go to another world, and, like, if you had that in any other context, wouldn't that be whack?
It would be weird if Emerald turned white.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Get it.
And I know that it's fake and it's not real, and people are gonna be like, oh, it's not real, but like, that's what they made it.
It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you really think about it, it's a little weird. Yeah. But if you look on it as a kind of surface, like, this is like...
But I can't. I can't ignore the fact
Part
that
of it is like, I guess in my mind it makes sense that like they're DC-ified when they go from, so they lose their faunus traits.
Okay, I don't know if it's DC or it's Marvel, but I have witnessed and I have seen people with animal traits, right? And like, aren't cyborgs friends in the DC universe? Like that little elf guy with the green skin and the pointy ears? You're telling me that like you can't, you know what I mean? I don't know who he is. I'm sorry.
The Skrull?
I don't know who he is. I'm just the green one in the thing with Cyborg and Robin, and there's a green
Beast
one.
Boy?
Beast Boy.
Beast Boy.
You're telling me that Beast Boy's fine and he can exist, but like Blake can't have cat ear? Because I understand people are like, oh, but they're in the human world, But like, when has that ever stopped?
Guess so.
Like Beast Boy looking character, you know what I mean? Because there are characters in DC and in Marvel and other superhero media that have animal traits.
Like people will like gentrify a neighborhood, but then complain about this.
But
like I feel like this is like this
That's
is
not
your.
fair.
I don't know. I guess I feel like okay, on like a level of like being annoyed with how it affects continuity. That's fair. Like acknowledging like, yeah, it is weird. I'm not gonna say it's not weird.
Yeah.
But I think I saw people online losing their mind, and it just feels a little bit like there's actual.
You have to keep in mind too that like
know.
no one in Team RWBY is a upon first glance like POC. Like obviously Yang is Chinese, right? And RWBY is half Chinese. But like it's one of those things where it's like characters like Lelouch and like Light Yagami, they're Japanese, but like they look very white. So you also have to keep in mind, Hunter, that like for, you know, some of the fans that are POC, it's like, okay, well, Blake was the one character who, at least in that world, is a visible minority, and then they took that out. And so even though Blake is supposed to be Asian,
not saying it's not
like,
weird.
oh, well, they took out Team RWBY already has no melanin, and they took out the piece of fantasy racism that made one of the characters.
I'm not gonna say it's not weird, but I feel like in all the ways that RWBY has fucked up the faunus, like this is the least.
But this is like exacerbated by all the other times they fucked up. You're assuming that no one ever complained until Blake lost her ears?
No, I know. I have complained.
I know.
There's videos of me complaining
you're
about
assuming
that
the people complaining never complained about anything else.
No,
I guarantee that those same people are still mad about the white thing.
Listen, I'm not saying that people can't be. I'm just saying, like, I think the reaction, I guess I viewed it at a kind of shallow level where it's just like, oh, I guess it makes sense. I understand how it would bother people, but like, I guess I just saw some people who really like reacted aggressively
I guess
to it.
What I'll say is that like, people are probably reacting that way because they have absolutely no faith in Rooster Teeth. That's nobody's fault except theirs.
That's fair.
And so like, you know, I wouldn't say that the ear thing is an overreaction because I don't think it's just her ears being gone. Because if they had brilliantly done the White Fang plot line and it was like, oh my god, like this storytelling, like it's so good, like this is the best depiction of fantasy racism we've ever seen in cartoon media, I'm sure people wouldn't be as like, why is Blake's ears gone?
That's
like,
fair.
you know,
That's
but it's
fair.
the fact that like the White Fang, they already fumbled. It's like, what hope do we have left? And so I think that's just the thing, right? I think that people's reaction is built on the shaky foundation of the White Fang being terrible.
Realistically, I do think that like the White Fang was the thing that really like sucked about the fauna stuff, but Blake's own like version of loving herself, I think in my personal approximation was pretty solid.
Oh yeah, but it's everything.
Yeah, but I also think realistically in the course of the movie, it will probably be like, I have cat ears, wow. And then like, oh my goodness, my cat ears. And then at the end, she'll get her cat ears back and she'll be like, yeah, I'm so glad to have them. Like, I think at the end of the, and I feel like if that happens, it'll be like, okay, so wouldn't that be less weird if it's like,
it would be less weird. Yeah. It's just like, I don't believe you. But we'll see. Like, you know what I mean? I have no faith in you. But we'll see.
We still need to look at how Weiss looks.